Alrighty, so having dealt with C3 in the positional line, we are now going to move on to the C4 variation. So we have got our knight d5, we have a traderino on f6, and in this position, instead of C3, white goes for C4. Now, this move has some downs and some ups, or ups and downs, if you will. The most important point is that these kind of positions with c4 in will be even more static than the c3 ones. So basically, white tries as hard as possible to cement the d5 square, or rather to control the d5 square, and they will accomplish it. But because of there's a pawn on c4, there is no bishop coming to c4, so it's harder to back the d5 knight with pieces. And also white has to babysit the d4 square, as our knights can often come in there. So it is going to be even more maneuvery most cases, in particular in the main lines. But because of its Sveshnikov, it's still a bundle of fun. And so with that in mind, let's begin. C4 is going to be met by b4. And after knight c2, we are not going to play the most popular move here, which is pawn a5, defending the pawn, but instead we play the slightly more dynamic castles. And I really do like this choice, actually, if I may say so, because A, it invites a variation with knight b4, where, again, there is quite lively piece play for us. And two, it's less likely that our opponents will be very familiar with this move, as a5 tends to be, as I said, the far more frequently played move. So at this point, white has got four major choices. And we are obviously going to begin with knight takes b4. By the way, the point of castling early is that if we waste a tempo on playing a5, then white has got this setup with a quick queen f3, hitting the bishop, and then rook d1 piling up on the d file and the d pawn, and it's a tad unpleasant. And if we castle first, then this plan is far less effective, as I shall show you that line with queen f3. But first, oopsie daisy, first I'm going to press the wrong button, and then I'm going to first show you what happens if they accept the pawn sack, and then I will show you what happens if they play queen f3. So, as for the capture of the pawn on b4, we are going to take, and therefore it doesn't matter which knight captures, take back, and queen b6. As is typical, we immediately try to utilize files, diagonals, whatever is opening up, to put pressure on white and to try to recuperate the invested material. Now b4 is hanging directly and b2 indirectly. We have got a number of choices here. Let's begin with knight d5. Perfectly harmless idea. We take on b2, bishop e2, bishop d8. This bishop is going to come around a fair bit, by the way, in these variations. And after castles, queen a3, we are doing absolutely well. Queen comes back to c5, bishop goes here, we trade it off, bishop b6, happy days. Or we can go g6, f5, king g7. No matter how we twist it or turn it, black is going to be fine. No problems here. So knight d5 is kind of silly. Knight d3 makes more sense to my mind because it defends the b2 pawn. But now we are going to turn on the heat with queen d4, exclamation mark. And lo and behold, guarding e4 has become a near impossible task. In fact, white is best advised to give up said task altogether. But now we can take castles. Now make sure that you don't blunder into bishop f3. So we play rook b8, b3, and queen g6. Bishop pair, nice pawn mass on the king side. It is looking absolutely fabulous. Bishop b7 coming, bishop g5 coming, f5 coming, victory is coming. Finally, queen d2, guarding the knight, guarding the pawn. Rook b8, attacking the knight, attacking the pawn indirectly. Now if knight d3, well, if a recipe works, don't change it. F3, bishop h4 check, a very cool idea to provoke yet another weakness. And then we slide all the way back to d8 in order to reemerge on b6. And yeah, our position is absolutely fantastic. F5 is also, by the way, a pending break, and it's perfectly relevant that right now we are down a pawn. Black is, in fact, a lot better here. So knight d5 after queen d2 still. Now we are going to capture b2, tucky, and black is better. Ever so slightly, but yeah, bishop e6, rook fb8, and there is no reason for us not to prefer black in this position. So long story short, really, capturing a pawn on b4 is not that hot. And that considered, I think that our choice is very smart that we castle first. It also, as I said, takes the sting out of the queen f3 operations, which are still playable. So let's see how exactly we propose to deal with this. It's going to be quite cool. So what we are going to do here, obviously, white, I think, may want to consider taking on f6. It's, you know, we always are kind of cool with the double f pawns. But in this case, I think after knight e3, we would have some difficulty carrying out any break. So it's wiser to move the bishop, but not to g5. No, we are going to go all the way to h4. We are going to tag the f2 pawn. So now f5 is a much more meaningful pawn break than usual, because it immediately challenges white, not only in the center, but on the king side too. Now, the greatest twist in the story of bishop h4, if I may tell you a very cool narrative here, is that, in fact, this bishop is looking to go to d8. We merely need to score a tempo, which is about to happen on the next move, and then the bishop is going to swing back from h4 to d8 and on to b6, a5, wherever we can find a job. How is it going to be achieved? Watch. G3 is the main move. And really, we should look at that, but I will show you that in case they play something like b3, f5, hits like an absolute truck. g3 forest, fe, queenie, bishop f5, and oh boy, this is already looking major trouble time for white, as the queen and the knight are skewered. Queen e2, knight d4. Ay. Take now, rook e8 is game winning, so castles is forced. And now we retreat the bishop, and that white king's defense looks like Swiss cheese, holes everywhere. And white doesn't really have any meaningful play whatsoever. So this is happy days. But what happens if g3? This is where the point comes. Next move, epic. Remember this. Queen a5. The point is that we are now threatening to play b3 check and regain the piece, and also obtain a very far advanced, dangerous, annoying pass pawn on c2. So some kind of a reaction here is definitely forced out of white. We have got 4 of these to discuss. If gh, b3, queen c3, more or less on the move, take, and although white is definitely going to recover the pawn, but we are going to enjoy white's rotten structure that has 1, 2, 3, 4 isolated pawns. So there is no way that black is not a little bit better here. f5 break actually might isolate another pawn on the board, and that is going to be really embarrassing. Black is doing splendidly here. Queen b3 stops the discovered check and allows us to demonstrate our point behind the bishop's sortie. Now the bishop begins its glorious maneuver toward b6. And of course, you are always happy to trade the bishop for knight. Know that now the d5 square and its weakness is more in theory than in actual practice. Visually, d5 is weak. Nominally, it's weak, but in reality, practically, it's not. And the reason for that is because as soon as you touch this knight with white and start rerouting here, I'm going to jump into d4. Additionally to that, and I really want you to remember this, because this is one of the greatest gains you can get out of trading the dark square bishop for a knight. If white were to plant a knight on d5, we can always trade it off. If we are to plant a knight on d4, they cannot use their bishop to trade it off. Happy days. Queen b3 was a bit silly. If castles, bishop d8 again. King b1, queen c5. And now the plan is slightly changed. I want to say the change is slightly planned. That actually is true too, because there is a change and it's planned. Wow. Nothing like a blooper that is not a blooper. So yeah, now the point is to send the pawns. Go, go, go. A5, A4, hurt the king. And later on, the bishop might still pop up on B6 or A5. But yeah, for now, what we would like to prioritize is our attack against the white king. And with that, we are coming up to the final variation within the queen f3 subline, sub-variations, which is b3, the healthiest move to really contest this idea of putting the queen on a5 and then selling the discovery. Needless to say that our main plan remains the same, bishop d8. And now, again, I have got a range of moves to show you. Against almost all of them, the bishop is going to be routed to b6. Bishop e2, bishop b6. Tuck, tuck. And again, same story as before, as far as the relative weakness of d5 and d4 squares are concerned. Additionally here, we have got an a4 plan to open up the queen side whenever it suits us. If bishop d3 instead of bishop e2, bishop b6 still, take, castles, and a5 just as well. There is literally no difference as far as our plans are concerned, whether the bishop is on d3 or on e2. Last but not least, if bishop g2, then you won't believe it, bishop b6, a3. Now, this is a bit of a challenge. We can also play knight d4. The knight d4 alternative looks like this. Take, check, knight c6, queen c5, take. And this is where the line ends. Queen f6 is jokesies. And yeah, the position is in balance, as in it is balanced. Having said that, yeah, d4, d6 pawns are a little bit loose, but the b3 pawn is going to be more than likely very, very weak. And so I think the evaluation is correct. Having said that, I think it's more fun in this position to play ba, b4, and queen a4. This is a wild skirmish, at least for the time being. Hanging b6, but hanging c2. You get the gist. This is going to be some Sveshnikov chaos. As far as I'm concerned, that is what we have signed up for when we engaged with this course. So let's go. If white plays defensively with queen d3, we jump into d4, renewing the threat on c2. Take, and yeah, we cannot be worse with that monster bishop on d4. Our plan is to play bishop b7, then we can trade on d5 if need be. And yeah, our position is going to be absolutely golden. If, however, they take on b6, then the tactical chaos continues. Take, and 3 sublines again. If they take the rook, knight d4. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Queen e3 only move. And now we play the super cheeky queen takes c4, denying castling and threatening knight c2 with a family fork. Wow. Rook c1 takes. Queen c3, a5. What a move! Down the rook, we casually defend our queen with an elegant pawn push on the edge of the board. And the evaluation is that white is in a world of hurt. Let me show you how it's going to conclude. Note that white can't castle because of knight e2 check. Knight c7 trying to evacuate with the knight, bishop e6, knight takes e6, fe6, and the threat that white is more or less helpless against is rook c8. For example, f3, rook c8, queen takes, check intermezzo, and handshake intermezzo with a celebration of winning a marvelous chess game. Well done. So, if they don't accept the rook, but they take the pawn, We go rook b8, take, and in strong contrast to the previous line, now it is rather dull and boring, but it's only black who can be better. After all, we are a pawn to the good. Finally, if white runs for the hills with castles, rook b8 again, knight d5, knight d4, queen a3, queen takes c4, extra pawn, we can't be worse. Cha-ching. And with that, friends, we have covered the two most interesting sidelines, or challenging sidelines, I should say. One with capturing b4 and the other one with queen f3. What is left is to deal with the very thematic h4 and the also thematic and in fact main line g3. So let's start our investigation now with 13 h4. Alrighty, so having dealt with the knight takes b4 and the queen f3 operations respectively, now we are going to move on to the kingside pawn moves, beginning with pawn to h4 and then finishing off this chapter with pawn g3. Now h4, of course, we know what that guy stands for. It stands for no bishop g5 for you, sir. And we go like, oh, well, okay, that's all good. We can make do without. Thank you very much. And by the way, in this chapter, or rather I should say, in this line, or in this branch of lines, again, we are going to witness the maneuver that we got to like so much in the past two chapters, this one and the one before, which is the bishop d8 and then to b6 and then to whichever square is available business. Note that it particularly makes sense against the c4 lines because here the d4 square is an outpost, so backing it up with bishop is always going to be a very handy addition to our position. Obviously, b4 is still hanging, so we need to look at that, but the pair of moves h4, bishop e6 inserted can only be good news to us if we want to compare like for like. So I would not expect anything great coming out of this business for white, and this position is a testament to that. We are clearly better here, so this just doesn't make sense. Knight ce3 is also on the cards, but this allows knight d4, which almost always is great news to us. g3, a5, and this is another thing that I would wanted to highlight. So in the c4 lines, we often, especially combined with h4, our kingside play may be a little bit limited, and so we often switch back to the queen side where we push our pawns up, trying to eke out a weakness or fix the pawn structure so that white can't do anything to us. Bishop h3, g6, we know the purpose of this move as well. We are looking to play bishop g7, potentially relocate on h6. And of course, as almost always, we warmly welcome the capture on e6, as fe6 would, in fact, trap the d5 knight. But even just eliminating the d5 weakness would be brilliant news. Okie dokes. So g3, this is almost mandatory and only and the most logical move. And again, we have already seen the ideas behind g3. It is often to provide further control to the d5 square, but very often you find that that bishop indeed goes out to h3 in the hope of a trade of the light squared bishop. a5, we now cover up our pawn, and we have got now a large number of choices available to white. Bishop g2 is, you know, it's a kind of a glass half full or half empty kind of scenario, not exactly a super exciting move. g6 and bishop g7 is going to keep us pretty happy and safe. If queen d3, we can throw in h5. We have seen this before. This now completely shuts down all kingside operations for white as well. Take castles. And after rook f d8, the position is more or less equal. I must admit it's also very stale, but you know, with black we can't complain. And we have got some positional trumps. The g2 bishop in particular is a very sad piece, and yeah, I wouldn't really want to be white here. So if instead of queen d3, they capture on f6 and then b3, know that taking on d6 is always a super risky endeavor on account of rook c8, rook d8, and that queen is going to end up in a world of hurt. Meanwhile, the c4 pawn is also under attack, hence b3. And now a4 demonstrates the pawn push idea I was talking about earlier on the queen side. Now we retain the tension, defend d6, and we have got ideas like rook a5, double up on the a file, and yeah, be an absolute pest. Rook b8, it's necessary to defend b4, rook d1, and bishop g4, perfectly in time to force f3 out of white, and then we return. Not the first time that we leave d6 hanging, but yeah, we already know the drill, that d6 capture is not going to guarantee an immediate happiness to white. For example, here, a very strong idea is to take, and play knight d4 and ask the question, okay, you are up a pawn, but who is exactly better here? Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you very much. Because rook a8 is already threatening to win a piece, and so that a1 knight is a shocking sight to behold. So yeah, do not worry about hanging that d6 pawn is the essence of the message. Right, back to our next line, which is going to be queen d2. Now, this is an interesting idea where white potentially puts queenside castling on the table. Queen d3 does the same, by the way, or similar. So we go a4 again. Now, obviously, queenside castles is unplayable on account of b3. However, what is playable is the capture of the pawn. Now we go queen b6, takes, and what we observe now is two hanging pawns, one on c4, one on e4. This can't be bad news. Bishop d3, and we take the pawn. a3, and the position is roughly in balance. Once again, we are going to rely on our favorite motive, bishop d8, bishop b6, and we are going to be absolutely golden. No problems at all. If instead knight c to e3, b3, now this is a very cool way to ensure that b4 is no longer hanging. A3 and bishop takes, queen a5. We are going to simplify the position, knowing that dark squared policies and plans and strategies will be indeed very strong. Bishop d8, we are going to plonk a knight on d4, rook c5, bishop a5. There is no way that black can be worse here. Love and life. Queen d3, I hear you say, no problemo. I am bringing you a4 again. And as usual, now we need to look at knight b4. So as you can see, it's a recurring theme that we hang b4, and it is also a recurring theme that it almost never yields anything to white to capture the pawn. It's almost a bit like a Benko vibe, where having the b5 for black seems to be a better option than having an extra pawn there. Now we go queen b8. A3 is more or less forced. And of course, I'm not going to come at you with anything surprising because you already know the drill and you could almost figure it out. In fact, maybe there is no need for the almost. Bishop d8 and the sniper is coming around. If castles, bishop b6. This is another almost like a rule of thumb in the Sveshnikov that if your d6 pawn is hanging, be sure that you play anything and everything under the sun that does not guard the pawn. Now, if white wants to preserve the f-pawn by playing f4, we go queen b7, dodging the potential queen trade if queen d6 hits us, and putting on the map a few tactical ideas along the c file, such as bishop c4 followed by rook c8. Hence king b1, rook c8, 95, bishop d8 back. Now this is a very strange move, which makes me wonder if this is a mouse slip, because this is meant to be bishop d4. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's bishop d4, and we mouse slipped here into bishop d8. Yeah, no, we're not doing bishop d8. No way. Bishop d4, rook b8, and yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. Actually, while we are at it now, I think that the idea behind bishop d4, instead of taking d5 and then bishop d4, is that we want to keep the pawn on c4 for the time being to deny white the queen b5 or queen a6 ideas to trade queens. So if you observe after bishop d4, we have got the mate threat on b2, right? And they cannot use the knight to shield the b file because c4 is hanging. If we had taken take, and then bishop d4, now they would have queen b5 potentially. So I quite like what we're doing here with setting up this mate threat. And yeah, my general vibe is, by the way, that every time white castles queenside in the Sveshnikov, it tends to be bad news, just bad news in the long run. And this line is a perfect example. Okay, on to the next variation. So if after bishop b6, they don't want to keep the pawn, but instead take on d6, which is probably the more logical scenario. We take f2. Now we have to accept the fact that queen trade is on. King b1. And we secure g3 as a weakness before we take it. The benefit of this is that for the time being, we are also holding white's idea to push the c pawn forward. And so white is kind of stuck here for a good move. Knight d5 is our recommendation, and we go back to d4, and after g6, continuing with king g7 and then f5. Although we are down a pawn, but we have got all the fun in the position, all the initiative, targets. Yeah, I'm loving life here. Yeah, this is a bit counterintuitive, so be sure that here we don't commit to bishop g3 when c5 can be quite problematic, and then the light squared bishop can come out, and white's position makes a lot of sense. This bishop is such an asset on this diagonal that we don't want to abandon it even for a pawn. Very instructive stuff. Okay, docs. So kingside, queenside castles, rather, excuse me, is not a major issue. Bishop h3 is going to be met by bishop takes, rook takes, and bishop a5, immediately trading down our potential problem bishop. And yeah, that is definitely not queen d2. We stop here. The endgame is favorable to white. It would be super favorable after queen d2, but that was a admin error there. But no matter what white does, material is leveled. The h3 rook is quite tragically misplaced. b2 is an easy target, so we have nothing to fear. And with that, we are now on to the knight c e3 line. So queen d3, knight c e3. And now we are going to play b3 again. This was played by MVL. The idea is to disallow queenside castling and provoke some kind of a reaction. If a3, then now we have check. Right on cue, just to prevent castling. Queen d2, take, bishop d8, and give me black every day of the week. I mean, I don't even know what to say. Knight is coming to d4, bishop coming to a5. White has no play. The king is a little bit awkwardly placed in the middle. Happy days. Happy days. So, yeah, it's likely going to be bishop e2 instead, but I'm not very impressed with this either, to be honest. Knight d4, bishop d1, rook b8, and as far as I'm concerned, we are better almost in every department, queenside, center, kingside. Castles, g6, we know the drill. We want to reroute the bishop g7 to h6, so probably trade is forced. And yeah, I can only repeat myself. No matter where I look on the board, I see happy faces behind the black pieces and lots of concerns for white. So yeah, great stuff. Okay, friends, final big variation bishop h3. This is the main line of the positional knight d5 and then c4 line. White obviously vacates the king side. Often they actually castle by hand here, and instead of committing to taking on e6, they play king f1, king g2. Quite clever, and they just take it from there. Once again, play tends to be stale unless you play stuff like a4, which puts some pressure on white. Knight e3, we go knight d4. This is routine now. King f1, bishop takes, knight takes, and queen b8, guarding the pawn on b4 and not really worrying about the double pawns on f6. Takes, takes, queen h5, and queen b7, immediately beginning the fight against e4. Bishop f5, knight takes, queen takes, and everything is just coming off, folks. And the most likely outcome is going to be a draw. If now they take on f6, we can just pick off c4 with a check, and then potentially e4 too. So that's not on. Therefore, rook c1 seems to be forced. And then after the queen trade, we're looking at this rook ending, which cannot be worse for black. No way. King e2, rook c8, rook d1, rook c6, and the game is level. And it's going to be a draw. So king f1, the main idea. Queen d7, very well timed, as now we are threatening to take on h3, check, winning a piece. So some kind of a response is forced. If king g2, the favorite reroute is about to begin. Bishop d8, as per usual. Queen d3, queen b7, covering the pawn on b4. Rook f1, queen d7, and that's a concealed draw for friends. Obviously, if they take on e6, we take with the pawn, and we are very happy. If they go back to h1, we go back to b7. Rook b8, and same old story. Once we plant the bishop on d4, the white extra material is not going to matter at all. We have got now a target on f2, a target on b2, bishop c5 and bishop d4 are both very logical moves to follow next. Love and life. Absolutely love and life. And so the main line is going to be main, not quite the main line, but I will get there, is knight f6 takes, king g2, takes, and f5. Whenever we can break with f5 with the double pawns, we know it's happy days. And here, I reckon White's best piece, the best piece of advice I have White is to try to speak English correctly, like I'm struggling with, and to score a draw by means of a perpetual check. That's as good as it gets. If rook d1 here, then queen e6. And now you are going to see the mighty power of the triple pawn, folks. Check this out. Take, rook d6, and b3 exclam. Take, knight e3, knight b4, and we prefer black. Yes, you heard that right. Knight d3 incoming, f2 weak, b2 weak. Yeah. Power of the mighty triple pawns. Friends, not every day you see that. Radio. And so G3, the final main line. The main line. Bishop G5. Now that we are allowed, we will assume that position on G5. If H4, we pull back. If Bishop H3, actually, let me start with Bishop G2. But these lines are really an inferior versions of the previous line, because in the previous positions we had the bishop on f6, and even that one was playable for black. So now with the bishop on this diagonal, that's clearly an improved line. So these lines are kind of redundant, but at least we get to practice routine things and our setups. Queen b8, rook a4, rook a d1, g6, knight d3, and rook d8. And next we play a4, and yeah, our position is totally fine. Absolutely fine. If b3, queen b8 again, queen d3, these lines are almost identical. Rook d1, a4 is the same, and rook f d1, a4 is also more or less the same. Now if queen d, we already go in. And we know that these positions are very deceptive because, yes, we are down a pawn, but we will be up a bishop, so to speak, because our bishop on c5 is going to be an absolute beast. If ed, we go in with knight d4, sacking a pawn again, just as usual, bishop g7, and again, what we rely on instead of material is the weakness of the dark squared complex, and we try to set foot on this diagonal as well with queen b6. Note that white can never challenge the a file, and so rook a3 is going to be annoying. Black cannot be worse despite the material difference. So bishop a3, bishop e6, and again, like, I don't believe in these lines for a second because our bishop on h6 is so much better. Queen h5 is a unique idea, I suppose, but a5, bishop f5, bishop d5, and then knight e7 handles it with ease. Knight e3. Now, obviously, we can't take that because of a cheeky checkmate on h7, but king h8 is going to take care of business. Knight g4. If no knight g4, then knight g8 was the big plan, by the way, threatening g6 winning the house. So knight g4 is forced. Knight g8 anyway. g6 threatens. So they must take. We take. And it was all for nothing as far as white is concerned. Now we are going to dislodge, excuse me, the bishop from f5. The queen is going to pop up on b6. We have got nothing to complain about. Happy days. King f1, also similar. a5, if now b3, then now I'm going to show you a new maneuver which we haven't seen yet. So now that the bishop is on h6, and might I add, it's well placed on h6, we don't need to worry about regrouping it on the dark squares. So what we are going to regroup instead is the knight. And since white is now committed to keeping the knight on c2 to cover d4, we are going to reroute to c5, which is a very nice outpost. Watch that. Not bad. Bishop f5, bishop g5. Now we are ready to kick with g6 if need be, and our position is golden. If they challenge us here with a3 upon dropping the knight back to b8, which is very logical and justified since now the a file is temporarily in white's control due to the disconnected heavies, knight a6, tuck, tuck. Now king g2, knight c5 is good news for us. This was just, yeah, nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Surely it's knight b4, so the tuck, tuck sequence continues. Take. Now if take is great news again. Bishop g2 looks very annoying, but we have a neat tactic here. Check. And the knight on b4 is loose. And that's the combination that we are after. Very neat, very crafty. Queen d6 and bishop f3 resolves the problem of the hanging queen with an equal position. Yeah. Actually, I'm beginning to prefer black here. But maybe e3 here? Yeah, no, these moves are not on. I am thinking that the best operation here, don't worry, ignore that. Queen e5 takes, and then some sort of knight move is going to keep the position in balance. Yeah, we are already. I feel like white needs to watch out. Like, this is already dangerous territory because their king is quite tender. Ours is very safe, so no need here for subtleties for white at all. They should be happy that they are still alive. Okay, so upon capturing b4, take b4 instead of taking on a8. If they retake b4 again, then we take a1, take back, and queen b6. Regurgitating the same story, but I feel I have to. Losing the b pawn almost always grants us counterplay on the b file. And this should be a draw, but objectively, it's ever so slightly better for black because f2 may be easier to target for us than f7 is for white. Yeah, so now bishop e3 is pending, whereas white hasn't done anything to hurt us yet. Okay, so back to king g2, queen b8, same old, same old. If queen d3, queen b7, these lines are eerily similar to the ones we looked at before. a4, b3, take, rook a2. And we are absolutely golden. Whereas if ED, then we take on b3, a neat tempo, utilizing the fact that DC can be recaptured with a check. And after take, we drop back to e7. Now we have got rook a2. Now we have got f5 on the cards. And most importantly, we have a fabulous position on our hands. So b3 again, queen b7, and then a4 break is coming. And we are very, very here with black. Dubov had this against Abdusattarov, or rather, both of them had it with black, excuse me, and they were happy campers, of course, understandably. Okay, so bishop g2 is the biggest main line. A5 castles. H4 transposes to the bishop h6 line, so we don't need to look at that. And b3 is playable when bishop e6, castles, queen b8, f4. Now, this is an independent idea, so I need to slow down here. We need to be a little cautious. We drop the bishop back to d8. Note again, we didn't get kicked with h4, so now best is to reroute the bishop via d8. What we really want to ensure here is that we never allow f5, f6. So if f5, thankfully we have take with a tempo. And now if pawns take on d5, let's start with cd, then you go in. Take. And the bishop is going to be gloriously placed on f6. So if we were to play bishop b6 here, I guess, yeah, maybe there is a bit of a problem solving still required on our end. So in contrast to the previous lines where we were so happy with chucking a bishop on d4, here we don't have a target here or here. But still, I think after f6, we should be quite okay here. The super safe method is to take d4 and then just plonk the bishop on f6, and nothing bad can ever happen to us. If queen takes, then bishop check and knight d4. And again, we managed to put the bishop on d4, and the queen on d5 is very debatable whether it's well placed or not. It can actually become a subject of some top-level bullying. So be mindful of that. Hence, the main line is ED. Now we go with the queen check, keeping the bishop at home to cover f6. And after knight d4, we are completely fine. In fact, we're slightly ahead. So instead of f5, king h1 is typical, and this is where we go like, we don't want to deal with this f5, f6 nonsense. We just bolster the position with f6. If we get pushed with f5, we drop back to f7, and otherwise we just continue carrying out our positional plan with bishop b6 and then bishop c5, putting something on d4. King h8, usual useful prophylactic move, and now we pull back. I don't believe in these kingside attacks. White lacks the dark squared bishop. It's already very difficult to see how they would carry out g5. And yeah, it's just not enough pieces. If anything, I feel like our queenside play is actually a lot faster. Take, and in we go. And we have penetrated the position. White hasn't even started a kingside attack. So this is a good demonstration of not giving into fears like, oh, that looks scary. No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. White doesn't have a good enough piece formation to support this attack. Like the pawn pushes appear to be thematic, h4, g5, but there's nothing beyond that that white can do with that. And so that's why this variation played out to be so neat and they're easy to play for black. Good stuff. If knight f5, we just go. That knight is not a threat. Queen h5, it's still a pie in the sky kind of thing. There is no meaningful kingside prospect there for white to be had. It's actually following a correspondence game that went like this. Bishop b6, takes. And now if knight takes, oh, is this going to be AB, rook e1, rook a1, queen d4? No, it's not. Oh, of course, I'm missing rook d1. Fair enough. So penetration is better, and then we are going to back it with knight d4. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, very nice position for black, in fact. Good job. Okay, if rook d1, then queen c5. Now rook d6 loses, the bishop takes f5. So it has to be the knight capturing. And again, after take, queen e3, our counterplay is going to be super obnoxious, especially since capturing b3 is going to yield us a passed pawn on the queen side. Okay, so if instead of queen h5, we go ba, bishop b6, knight takes, queen d6, bishop c4. White has to watch out here because now everything is hanging and rook d8 is a queen trap. So a5 is only, queen b5, rook d1, bishop takes a2, cheeky capture, and essentially a game-ending tactic as bishop takes a2 would lose the house to rook d8. That's what you call an ouchie. This is a potential draw. But yeah, they need to be very, very careful and smart to find that. Okay. So back to main line. Castles. Bishop e6 and queen d3. f4 now can be captured and we pull back. Now pushing the f5 forward would revitalize our h6 bishop like mad. So that's out of the question. If knight e3, we go knight e7, take, king h1, rook e8. And the point of rook e8, of course, is that we want to break with f5 next in true Sveshnikov fashion and have a slightly better position because the f4 pawn is in fact weaker than its counterpart on d6. Queen h4 is coming. We've got a lot of nasty things to do here to white. The position is very, very nice for us. Okay. King h1, no problem. Queen h4. This is an important motif that we like to rely on when the g3 pawn recaptures on f4. Queen e1, white is best advised to trade the queens, and this endgame cannot possibly be worse for us. b3, however, is a motif you want to keep in mind. The idea is that it's a temporary sack, and now we are pressuring the b5. Rook e3, and in case you guessed a3, you were a4 rather, excuse me, you were correct. Note that b4 is not playable on account of bishop takes followed by knight takes. So ba is forced, and now the penetrating forces are too strong. g6, cheeky little sortie to play bishop g7. And after the masses of trades, although we are down a pawn, but we have got some spectacular piece activity. Rook c8 may come, rook b8, rook penetration on the b file may come. It's all fun and happiness here. Note that white has got 5 pawns in 4 islands. That's not optimal by any stretch. Okay, queen d3. This is the most non-combative, very rigid play style where white just goes like, I don't want anything other than bolstering d5 with 47 pieces, and let's see what you can throw at me in the interim. We go queen b8, protecting our pawn on b4. And now, once again, we have a number of lines. If b3, bishop reroute. Almost always, that's the main point of the queen move. We vacate the d8 square, and so the bishop can swing around. You know that taking on d6 is always very dangerous. This time, rook d8 actually traps the queen. And after a3, tuck, rook a7, we are absolutely fine. Rook b7 can be played. Rook b8 can be played. G6, king g7 can be played. Yeah, we are going to see a game in the model game chapter. Kuibokarov Oparin will look something like this. Rook d1, bishop d8. Now if knight d3, excuse me, bishop b6, queen d6, knight d4. We have got about 16 lines in this course where black wins the d6 pawn, and none of them are good for white. I think that tells a story. And again, down a pawn, but up the initiative. And the bishop, man, is that a terrible piece. White is actually a teeny bit worse here, despite the extra pawn. And so f4 is the final move to look at here. Check, take, take, and f6. Easy as. Note that queen d6 is not playable on account of takes. And yeah, consequently, black is perfectly fine. And last but not least, friends, after f4, we drop the bishop back. King h1, f6, b3, and bishop b6 again. And after take, take, now we have got a couple of moves to look at before we can conclude this business. Queen takes d6, bishop f7, queen d2, rook d8, take, take, rook d2 penetration, a2 is on, knight d4 is pending, a4 is on. We are very, very happy to be black here. If instead f5, bishop f7, g4, you know where I stand with this one. In my opinion, it's hot nothing. Queen g3, king h8, h4, rook a7, g5, and bishop h5. This is again a textbook case where the attack is just not quite there. It's just not quite there. Note how handily the rook, by the way, offers assistance from the other end of the world. Bishop f3 is forced, take, take, knight d4, and too many pieces come off for white to be able to drum up anything meaningful. Queen c5, and yes, we may lose d4, but b3 is also going to be hurting. For example, rook d2, take, take, queen e5, and just on time, we double up on the a file, we infiltrate with the queen, and because of that white king is so weak now, this position is actually preferable to black. Wow. And for the final big hurrah, rook a d1, a4, queen d6. Rook d2, we just take, we defend the pawn. And yeah, this is basically one of those scenarios where white tried everything, and now it's time for us to fight back because, yeah, the g2 bishop is awful, the dark squares are very weak, b3 pawn is vulnerable, and g4 is just nothing. Just nothing. We go in and, yeah, there is not enough oomph in this attack. And after king g7, yeah, rook f2, bishop g6, our king is perfectly safe. Nothing to be afraid of. Happy days. And so consequently, after a4, best is queen d6. At least now they can take that pawn with the tempo. But now we also have a tempo with bishop g4 that we know also well. Queen d5 check, king h8, rook c1, and rook a5. Note that rook d8 ideas here are less impressive on account of queen b5. So we need to ensure that this queen gets kicked first from the side before it gets kicked on the front. And after take, take, a b4, a super cheeky, big boomshki move. Of course, now knight g4 is terrible. So AB has to be played. Knight g4 takes, followed by b3, b2 is immediately terminal. So the recapture is forced. And now we go into e2. And now we go into d4. And thus we secured a target on b3. A file, the A file is going to be where we are going to infiltrate, and we might be better despite the material deficit. Again, we typically want to throw in a little bit of a h5 there just to ensure that our king is safe and sound. And friends, that brings us to the end of the positional 95. And now we begin our investigation of the variations that we are going to call for the rest of this course, the tactical ones from White's perspective. But what is tactical for them will be certainly tactical for us too. So let's have a look at those.